Hello and welcome back. My name is Sean and today is a special edition of a review because it is by far the biggest surprise that I have had going into this new year and just in general. I cannot remember the last time I got this excited about a book, and even though the audiobook version of this was something like over 40 hours, I could not put it down and finished it in just a few days. And that is The Wandering Inn, Book 1 by Pirate Ava. She may have her real identity out there, but I'm not deep enough into the lore to really know if that's the case. But before we get started, just a quick announcement. I have started a Discord. I will put the link down in my description. Come join, it's pretty empty, and I will be posting announcement updates, and with the live show coming pretty soon, then that will be the main vehicle for the live weekly streaming thing that I'm doing. But that is besides the point because I have a lit RPG that I want to talk about.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening.
But to get things started, I'm going to try to keep this pretty spoiler free. I will be giving away some context things and talking about the world at large, but not getting into any specific plot details. So if that bothers you, then I will leave you with this is an amazing series if you are a fan of lit RPGs at all, or even the isekai genre, or just like fantasy remotely. I would say I'd highly recommend this. I've seen multiple other booktubers just rave about this, including ones that have wildly different opinions on multiple books.
I'm not your friend, buddy! I'm not your buddy, girl! He's not your guy, friend!
So it is rare when you find a book, especially an indie lit RPG, that seems to unite a lot of the major booktubers that are in the space. So check it out, join my Discord, read it. It was really good. But for everyone else, I was just absolutely blown away by this, and like I said, I couldn't put it down. I just picked it up as the first book of the new year because I've just heard so many people recommend it and just generally glowing reviews, so it was definitely hyped up just even entering into this book. And it starts out where it's like, okay, this is kind of intriguing, and then you just keep listening, and then more intriguing things pop up, and there's more like, I wonder how that works, or I wonder what's happening with this. It's like, this is a different character, and the next thing you know, you are 20 hours into a book, and only a third of the way, and you're just like vibrating with excitement to know what's next.
Wow. Wow.
It's one of those rare books where normally I have times that I just sit down and read, but then certain times I get into a book and it's like I start to lose sleep over it, and this is definitely one of those like lose sleep over books, at least for me. But aside from my general gushing thoughts, let me dive into some specifics of why I think this is a great book and why you should also check it out. So one thing that I heard about this series that absolutely holds up is just the sheer level of expansion that happens. The story itself kind of starts like a normal isekai. Girl takes a wrong turn, winds up in a completely different world, and it has those lit RPG elements where you have a class system, fantasy races, just a completely new continent. No one really knows about Earth, and there's just a lot of things that are going into it. But where it differs from normal is that you generally have an overpowered character that just starts exploiting the system and just becomes just like an S tier, like god amongst all the normal things. And you have to deal with like the power leveling, and there's never really any thought of the philosophy of like, hey, you're suddenly plucked out of Earth with your own cultural norms and plucked into another one, and then having to deal not only with the cultural norms that aren't just generally European medieval fantasy, you also have to deal with the scope of the character, has to defend themselves, has to actually like kill in order to survive. And this is one of the first books I've seen, especially in the lit RPG genre, that has actually really focused on the psychological elements of that. Too often you see characters just like run in and they're just immediately these like sword swinging adventurers that are just completely unstoppable, and it was really a big breath of fresh air to have characters that actually thought about the repercussions of their actions, what secrets of Earth it should actually tell, and then just also, hey, this is literal life or death situations. You see your friends die, you see, certain characters die, and then it's not just like oh, I'm going to spend a chapter being sad. You actually have characters that have psychological damage with this, and it follows them through the book. So just being able to see that was just such an amazing thing, because it's such an overlooked thing, I think, in a lot of fantasy. You see it with certain authors that are doing very well, but especially for like indie authors themselves, especially first debut books, it's rare to see that coming out of someone's like first effort, and just to have something like of this high quality, especially coming out of like a web serial. So highly, like, just really enjoyed those little extra steps that Pirate Abra took, and the expansion of just from the isekai and dealing with all those things, it really truly becomes kind of like an epic fantasy. The scope of everything, the amount of directions the story can go, the plot threads that are introduced, it's just, there are so many books out right now, and they're all tremendously long, and I'm just so excited to see just where all these are going to lead out. And another thing that I really enjoy, especially with these type of lit RPG genres, is that it's very easy just to have them be like progression fantasy, power leveling, and while there are elements of like power leveling in this thing that's just inherent to the plot, the author here actually takes the idea of taking flawed characters and having a big focus on character growth. I've seen a lot of times where that's just kind of like forced or rushed, or you just have a character that's just overwhelmingly smart or has some overwhelming advantage coming from Earth, where they just seem to like abuse that just to metagame the environment they're in, and you never really get to see them grow as characters. Yeah, you see them grow in power and maybe they become a bit mature, but in this book, you definitely have characters that have serious character flaws that like aren't necessarily like bad flaws, but what if you're just a normal girl from Michigan that has just lived a very sheltered life, and then suddenly you're having to deal with like life or death, or maybe you're a bit more naive with certain things and you're just thrown into like situations where you have to deal with that loss of innocence, the actual taking of lives. Is just, between that and another character that's just extremely hard-headed, very intelligent, and also like very smart, watching them have pride constantly getting their way, I just really enjoyed when you have flawed characters that are realistic and actually react in realistic ways to like plot stimuli. So in this, that was probably one of my favorite things outside of just the sheer world expansion of it, is that the character development in the series, just in the first book, you can see there is still a lot of work to do, but it all feels very realistic. And like, I think if you were suddenly isekai'd into a world where you had class systems and monsters trying to kill you and having to deal with all of this was just a much more realistic take on what I think like it actually would look like. Not everyone's going to be the power god master prodigy that's using their earth knowledge to just overcome everything. There's going to be struggle and hardship and growth because of that, and that's one of my favorite things I look for in books, especially indie books. And this book also juggled a few cool elements on there. There was a lot of like cozy world building. The main character, Aaron Solstice, is an innkeeper. The book's name is The Wandering Inn, so that's not too big of a plot reveal, but a lot of this book revolves around just her kind of settling into the world, learning the culture, getting over the culture shock, and just actually building an inn. I haven't talked about it in a review yet, but I really enjoyed Legends of Latte for that same type of progression, because as you find new menu items and figure out how to actually run the inn, there's a definite satisfaction that's not just like, I'm now power god level 6 red level. It's like, oh, I figured out how to cook this new dish or translate this thing that's unique to this world and kind of put my own earthly flavor on it. So it's very cozy in certain parts, but what I think makes this more special is that it still has those like epic dark fantasy moments in it. There is tragedy, there is hardship, and you get to see that combined in a very weird, interesting way that I cannot say that I've actually ever seen before. So not only do you have that like cultivation of progression building and building up your inn and your society and your friends and your community, but then you still have to deal with like undead liches, goblin hordes, dragons, undead kings, mad kings, and just all these like cool elements that just kind of converge on there in very unlikely ways. So definitely a great mix of just like cozy and dark that I highly enjoyed. And I think most of all, and this is probably my favorite thing when I start getting to lit RPGs, and one of the things that really just attracts me to these type of books, is like the meta game world mechanics in there. A lot of times you're just going like domain, and it doesn't seem like a lot of things are affecting each other, but there are so many plot threads that are introduced in there, and you start out in a pretty narrow scope. Aaron's at an inn. How do I be an innkeeper? What the hell is a city? Why is that giant lizard man staring at me and breathing fire? What is this hyena like dog person, and why are they being shitty to me? And you start with that small thing, and the world just keeps expanding out and expanding out. I thought with some books that I've gotten that have maybe a similar flavor or genre as this, especially when you start getting past like audiobook ranges of like 30, 40 hours, a lot of times I'll just get bored. I think like 25 hours to 30 hours is generally my like attention span when it comes to audiobooks. But for this one, the way that the new expansive plot elements were introduced, the new characters, the new world, how certain things affected other things, and how other characters were actually smart and started to use that to change the plot, it was just all continuing to build up in a way that I was just like hooked till the very end. I mean, like I said in the very beginning, once I finished this, I had literally listened about like 45 hours worth of audiobook. And rather than go back to Malazan like my plan was, I just immediately got the second book and continued reading. And I'm now like 15, 20 hours into that book, which is 60 hours, and I'm still not bored with it, which is, I think, like the highest praise that I can give a book. Just I'm not getting bored of it despite being in this for a very significant amount of time. And because this is so expansive and so many things are set up, it's cool because this series has been out for a while. I don't know how many books are out currently. I think there's more than 7, and each one is about between the range of like 40 to 80 hours worth of audiobook. Some massive amount of page count, but with these type of books I prefer to like listen to them as I'm doing things, so I cannot say what that is. I'll put a graphic up somewhere around here to illustrate my points. But even the way the first book ended is just such a good, compelling book that like left on such a cliffhanger that I'm just desperately excited to know what happens. And as we expand out, it never felt overwhelming to me. I've read a lot of really expansive lit RPGs and progression fantasies and epic fantasies, but I feel like the way the information was delivered here, you do have a lot of questions and how certain things work, but there is a lot of fun just going on with the journey and trying to figure it out. This is one of those that I've been very careful about, like looking at the wiki, just because I want to experience everything as it happens, but just an absolute blast to get through so far. And lastly, I just really enjoy the first 2 characters. I think if I had to give any negative to the points, and this is one thing that I just appreciate because I know there will be a payoff for that, but some of the initial character flaws, naivety, can get a little annoying because this is such a long book and certain things are getting set up. There are portions of it, while they are realistic and I highly appreciate for them, they can be a little bit of a slog to get through, but with me enjoying everything else and knowing that this book has like paid off multiple times, it's not the worst thing to get through, but there are certain points where certain actions have consequences, or you're inside a certain character, Ryoka's character flaws, that it can get a little annoying and you're kind of like screaming at the book, just like, please stop doing this, you can make better decisions. It doesn't have to be like this, but in reality, it does have to be it. But that's the only real negative thing that I can say about book 1. I just had an absolute blast for it, nothing negative for that. And this is a series that I will be binging probably until I'm caught up with it, on top of all my other series that I still have to cover. Sorry. But I'm really excited to see where this goes, and I'm absolutely just hooked in. So really excited. Pick it up, highly recommend. I'll be reviewing the next book as fast as I can. Have some other things front loaded, but if once I start getting into books 2, 3, and so on and finish the series, then I will be getting into spoilers the next time, and I might even do a spoiler dive for this at some point, but highly recommend. Pick it up. Completely taken off guard and surprised by just how much I enjoyed this. But thank you all for tuning in. Like I said, check out the Discord down below. Come join. There is a Wandering In section in one of the book forums. I'd love to talk about this, so please join in. And as always, thanks for your time and take it easy.